Welcome to the Changing the Conversation Q&A series. This series consists of 4 parts, each of which expands briefly on the questions raised during the Changing the Conversation webinar series. 4 webinars that provided invaluable insights to framing hot topics related to implicit bias towards aging and tools from the National Center and our partners. Before we begin, we would like to introduce the National Center to Reframe Aging, the trusted source for proven communication strategies and tools to effectively frame aging issues. The National Center is dedicated to ending ageism by advancing an equitable and complete story about aging in America. We are the nation's leading organization cultivating an active community of individuals and organizations to spread awareness of implicit bias toward older people and influence policies and programs that benefit all of us as we age. With us today, we have Eunice Nichols, Lacey Brown, and Darcy Yvonne, all of whom supported and/or presented during the Igniting a Multi-Generational Movement portion of the webinar series. Thank you all for joining us today. During the webinar, you all shared such interesting and important information, and participants had many questions. One of the questions that brought up a lot of conversation was around the desire to have intergenerational connections, friendships, programs in our communities. So we're curious, from your perspective, where can we begin intergenerational work? Is it better to encourage intergenerational connections at home, or more powerful to engage in opportunities within the community? And Eunice, let's start with you and your work at CoGenerate.
Thanks. Yeah, I love this question, and my answer is probably going to sound a little bit like both and or all of the above. I think for many people, when we talk to them, the most natural place where an intergenerational connection is going to happen is in their home life and or in their immediate surrounding, in their neighborhood, in their immediate community, or in a place that they have a lot of other connection to already. And that's a fantastic place to start. Although you'd be surprised even there how without intentionality, people can be surrounded by family members or neighbors of other ages and never actually intersect with them. So some of that is just actually opening your eyes to see the potential, and then having it within yourself to go across and actually talk to that neighbor at a family gathering, spend some time with the older or younger person in your midst. But I actually feel like for many of us, the place where we will most easily dig into an intentional intergenerational connection is going to be in the workplace. There are now 5 generations often in the workplace. And for us to think about how the structure where we spend a lot of our time can create meaningful collaboration across generations is going to also be a natural platform. And the last I'll say is service and volunteerism. I think that's a place where people put their own agendas aside, go in and want to do good. I think if you're thinking about getting involved in your community through a more structured volunteer opportunity, to actually think about not just gravitating towards where all your near peer age group friends and colleagues might go volunteer, and instead think about where might you go that will extend your experience across generations and bring a different kind of meaning and diversity of relationship into your life. If you're older, that might mean really thinking about how you might volunteer in an education space. If you're younger, you might think about how might you go and volunteer someplace where you'll be exposed to older adults. And as you do it, think about the mutuality of what you're bringing, not just what you're giving, but what you're going to gain from that experience.
Some great suggestions. And Darcy, you, Village Chicago, started a program to offer an opportunity of intergenerational connection. I'm curious, how did your organization get started in developing that program? What was some of your first steps?
Well, first of all, everything Eunice said is spot on. So it's really important to look at, your apartment, your condo, your neighborhood, and ways that people can engage and be together. The volunteer aspect of it is really important. So if a younger or older individual wants to immediately have, an intergenerational experience, they can volunteer for an organization. that will bring them into contact with people of different ages. What we did at the Village Chicago is we started this Ageless Innovators, of where we paired a younger leader, a corporate or nonprofit leader, with an older individual, typically who was retired or involved with their own firm, involved also as pretty much a business and corporate or nonprofit leader. And getting it started really can be done in several different ways for an organization. The way we did it is that we identified a really important potential partner who fit all of the criteria that we needed in terms of access to a lot of younger people, because the Village Chicago is predominantly older adults. And that was Chicago Innovation. And Chicago Innovation, which I had been involved with for about 15 years, they had a huge mailing list. They had an interest in the program. They were involved with the funder, Retirement Research Foundation, like we were. So there were a lot of synergies. So we brought really the two populations together and then promoted it in our newsletters. And that was tremendously successful.
And Lacey, I'm curious, the Growing Active Readers program that you with others developed at South Dakota State University Extension really focuses on bringing these two generations together. What is your encouragement to folks who might want to kickstart that conversation with a grandparent or with an older person in their life, or vice versa? What would be your number one tip to someone who wants to get started and using the resources you help create?
Probably visit the website so you can download them. And that's the one great thing about these resources. They're free to use, they're free to download. That Growing Active Readers series typically focuses on physical nutrition, that type of education and awareness for young people, trying to help them understand the role they have in their health and wellness. But we added the materials are already widely used. So we added those lessons that really try to provide positive lessons about older adults and aging, because unfortunately so much of what younger people learn, like if you look at the fairy tales, you look at the media that they're exposed to, the messages about aging are typically negative. It's the wicked old witch, it's very rarely the wise fairy godmother. Most of the time the messages that children are exposed to about aging are negative. The older person is often the villain in the story, the fairy tale. And we wanted to offer an alternative story for young people and encourage them to engage with the older adults in their life, because truthfully, that's where we learn the most about aging when we're young, when we're children. We learn about aging from our families. And by creating opportunities for younger people to engage with older people in their lives, it can help overcome some of those stereotypes that they might be exposed to and provide a more realistic understanding of what it means to be an older person and understand the value that older people bring to our lives and to our community. So really, we're looking for an avenue where we could provide that positive aging content to young people to try to counter some of the negative stuff that we know they see. I mean, we can't control that, we can't stop that, but every new positive message, realistic message that we can bring forward to help young people have a more optimistic outlook on getting older, because unfortunately that negativity starts so young and it's tragic when you see it.
And I think that transitions us super well into another conversation or another question that was brought up. And Darcy and Lacey, you've both done trainings with the National Center in understanding the strategies we want to advance and traps we want to avoid, begun implementing the principles to reframe aging in your work. So I'm curious how you've noticed the principles to reframe aging playing a role in the intergenerational programs and tools that your organizations have created.
We just have some data from surveys on the Ageless Innovators, when they start and when they finish a program. And it's quite surprising. When they first start the program, they aren't sure what age bias is. They aren't sure what ageism is. And they don't really understand whether it's right or wrong for companies to lay off all older adults when they're trying to save money, or what some of the values are. And by the end of the program, it changes, it shifts. So it shifts from about 60% to 99 or 100% of where all of these issues are front and center. And they say it passionately. And the way we've been able to do that is to really reframe age, taking some of the lessons from that, especially on social justice issues. And that resonates incredibly well with younger people, but it also resonates with older adults who, some of them, who said, no, I don't really notice any ageism, or I don't really notice any bias, in these different environments. And by the end of the mentoring sessions, they understand really well, and they see it and they observe it and they speak out about it. Whether it be someone telling a really bad joke, or the doctor, just telling them, oh, don't worry about it, you're just getting old, in terms of a condition, or in the workplace, what they have come to appreciate and celebrate intergenerational work teams. Because once you understand that the younger person isn't ignoring the meeting and they're actually taking notes on their iPad, and that the older person really has something important to say that's based on decades of research that can help, they can help one another mutually, then it really makes a big difference. So I was so grateful really for the reframing age training, especially for the information about how you take a program and you put it, firmly into a social justice sphere.
I'll talk a little bit about how we applied some of the lessons learned during the reframing aging training, the othering language, the labeling theory. We tried to keep all of those things at the forefront when we were putting together these materials, so that they would be hopefully presented in a way that is more positive, doesn't tap into the stereotype. So we really tried to use what we learned in that training to help with that. We don't have a lot of evaluation data on the Growing Active Readers series. This particular segment of the series, there's probably 30 books total. This particular segment contains 3 books, and we released those at the beginning of this year. So they've only been out a few months, but like I said, we use what we learned in the reframing aging to help develop those materials and, promote why we needed to add these lessons to the materials.
And I might add also just a note on the power of reframing aging and really thinking about the mutual benefit of older and younger together. Often an organization might start by thinking about a program or an initiative or a project they can launch that is intergenerational. And then in the process of having a program mindset, realize that their organization and their staff dynamic is being impacted as they learn from the implementation of the program. So sometimes we'll support a cohort of innovators doing intergenerational collaborative work. And it turns out actually half of the journey we support them on is actually about turning that perspective inward on their own organization. And I think that's actually a powerful dual pathway to caretake and keep in mind as you do this sort of work.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I know for me, this conversation engenders and ignites that excitement around imagining what the programs that you all and the conversations that you all help facilitate in our communities, realizing the impact that you all just shared. Thank you again for joining us for this part of the Q&A series. If you haven't seen the Igniting a Multi-Generational Movement webinar featuring the work of Eunice, Darcy, and Lisi, please watch the webinar by accessing the link to the recording in the description. Thank you all for tuning in.